Well, hello, this is Pastor Frank Lewis, and welcome to another program about marriage. And you're going to learn some things today that are, I think, going to be surprising. But I want to first of all tell you about my book. This is my book. It is a book that I wrote. It is the basis for everything that we're talking about in all the books on relationships revealed, and certainly the marriage book. It's a book you can get on Amazon, and it is going to be extremely valuable to you. The other thing you can do is you can go to my website, and that is relationshipsrevealed.org, and that website has a listing of all the books and a place for you to ask for help. If you want help, I help people. I do counseling, pastoral counseling, and I have been a pastor for 12 years in my own church, and that's where I came to know about the key and how the key is the key for your healing. And so you can come to that website, relationshipsrevealed.org, and you can press the button Want Help or the button Learn More. Learn More will get you in touch with me. Want Help, I'd like you to tell me what kind of help you want and give me your phone number if you feel comfortable with that. Certainly your email, but if you feel comfortable with your phone number, then I can call you and we can work out a time to see how I might be able to help you. Now, last week, you might recall, we talked about the whole understanding of what causes fear and shame. And so pain causes fear and shame. Do you remember that? Pain causes fear and shame. Remember, Adam was in the garden with Eve. God had said, it's not good that man should live alone. That's going to be very important to us as we understand what we're talking about today, which is the power of rejection that comes from pain. Actually, the power of rejection that causes pain. Let me say that properly. So we're in the garden, they're in the garden, and Adam and Eve are naked and not ashamed. After they disobeyed, they were naked and ashamed, and they hid. So they were afraid. So pain, where did the pain come from, you ask? I told you last week it came from their loss of the relationship. They were separated from God. Did they die? Yes, they died spiritually. They were separated from God. Very similar to the way Jesus had to be separated from God when he went for 3 days and 3 nights into the belly of the earth. So this here, he passed the test that Adam failed. That's just a little side note for you. But what happened is they felt excruciating pain from a loss. I lost my wife. She went to heaven in 2021, December 29th. And what happened is it was great pain. My first wife divorced me. It was great pain. Anytime you lose a relationship and it's unexpected, especially if it's unexpected, of a close family member, a spouse, or God forbid, a child, there's going to be excruciating pain. And that pain caused them that they'd never felt before. You have to understand, it's a miracle they even lived through it. But that pain caused them to have fear of more pain and also to hide among the trees of the garden. So they hid. And what happened was that in their hiding, they became less than who God created them to be. That was always the issue that Satan said to them, you will be like God. Well, he lied. But the reality to it, they did know differently. And is it a possibility, I've asked this question last week, is it a possibility that their 5 physical senses were switched on? I think it really is, because they knew they were naked and then they felt shame. Well, how did they know they were naked after they disobeyed? When they didn't know they were naked, before they disobeyed. I believe their five physical senses were switched on. But in any case, they certainly felt great pain, and they hid, and they felt shame, fear. Remember that Adam said, I was afraid. I was naked and I was afraid. Well, he was afraid, and he was afraid of what punishment might come, because I believe the devil gave him a thought, had a legal right to give him a thought then, because he had disobeyed, that God was going to punish him. God didn't, but that fear was there, and they didn't want any more of that pain. So shame was also a result of their nakedness. They're knowing in a different way. They're knowing by their five physical senses. Now, what's interesting is that if we have shame-based parents that raise us are shame-based, they're going to cause us to be shame-based also. We're going to have a problem. Toxic shame is the shame that says, I know not that I did something bad if I do something bad, but that I am bad. I'm inherently defective and worthless. That's toxic shame. I had a lot of toxic shame, and we're going to talk later about how you deal with toxic shame, because that's going to become very, very important in our solutions part of the book, in our solutions part of these talks. So toxic shame is the problem, and what happens is once we feel toxic shame, because is it true that we're not valuable, important, and worthy? And in my case, I was defected and hated myself because of how my father treated me. Maybe your problem, maybe how you were treated caused you to feel like I did. Is it true? No, it's not. But it was my truth, so therefore it is true to me. And because of that, I was not who God created me to be, and I couldn't trust God, and it was a very difficult situation. Now today, I'm going to talk about another aspect of what pain does. Not only does pain cause fear and shame, not only does pain cause us to hide the true self that we are, but pain comes from rejection. Remember, we're created by God. God said it's not good that man should live alone, so he made him a helpmate. That helpmate was part of a relationship that God wanted. God created us for relationship. And so if we are created for relationship and we're not in relationship, we're in pain. Well, that's a problem, because if we are rejected over and over and over again, we're going to have a fear of rejection. Now, rejection, I'm going to read to you, is defined as to refuse to accept someone or something, to rebuff, to discard as useless or unsatisfactory. Wow. Useless or unsatisfactory. That's just exactly how I felt, and that may be how you're feeling today. And if you are, then know that you've been rejected over and over again has caused you to have those feelings of worthlessness and uselessness. And so we want to deal with that today. What is the power of rejection? So you may have been rejected, and rejection causes horrible problems, because you know what it really causes? Pain. And interestingly enough, pain that you have pain from, let's say, a physical injury. Okay, well, that pain, once you get like the broken arm put back together again, or you get stitched up or whatever, that pain is real pain. That's physical pain. When you're rejected, it's emotional pain. Now, what's really interesting, catch this please, what's really interesting is that pain is processed either physically or emotionally in the same part of the brain. And because it's processed in the same part of the brain, the physical pain and the emotional pain is very, very hurtful. Physical pain hurts, emotional pain hurts. Now, you probably know that. You've been rejected. You know that it hurts. But now you know the reason why it hurts is because the brain processes it in the same area, so it has a very significant result of feeling hurt. So we don't want to feel that pain again. So what we do is we end up avoiding pain, having a fear of rejection. And if we fear rejection, then we will not be the people that God created us to be. We won't be who we are supposed to be. We won't be real. In a marriage, it's a horrible thing. If you were raised with great rejection or even any rejection, and you were, because everybody's rejected somehow, some way by their parents because the devil sets it up that way, then what ends up happening is you end up in a situation where you fear rejection. You may fear rejection to the point where it absolutely affects, and if we've been rejected at all, it's going to affect our self-image. It's going to affect how we view ourselves, and it's going to affect who we think we are. Now, we're going to try to avoid more pain, so what ends up happening, and this is probably what you're doing, is you're hiding the real self. You don't want to be known at a deep level. You don't want to be known at all. Why? Because you were rejected over and over and over again, so you don't want that to happen again. So you end up hiding the real self, the real you, and it ends up being a real problem. In marriage, if you hide the real self in any relationship, but particularly this one in marriage, if you hide who you really are, you cannot have intimacy. You cannot be known by your spouse at a deep level. So that's not going to work. And so we end up having a situation where we don't want that pain. That pain hurts too much. Now, what's interesting about this is that when you have physical pain, you have a stitched up wound, it heals, you can't remember the pain. It's not like rejection. See, rejection, you have a memory and the pain comes back into your memory just like as when it happened. Well, that's very, very difficult to deal with. So people get afraid. Even a memory of the rejection of their childhood or rejection by their spouse can cause them to go into pain. Well, that's not good. And what it'll do is it'll cause them to avoid the people who've caused them pain. So you may be avoiding your spouse in certain situations. You may be avoiding others. And what that causes you is more pain, which the devil just loves because you were created for relationship. And when you're not in relationship, you're in pain. And I talked about that a number of sessions ago. So that's the problem that we're dealing with, is the pain is very real, and the memory of it can actually cause us to feel the pain all over again at the same level of intensity as when we first went through it. So that's vitally important to know, and that's going to cause us to avoid pain at all costs. So pain from rejection lasts longer and actually is more intense, and certainly more pain occurs in the memory than any kind of physical injury. So pain literally hurts, and that's a very real, really very real situation. So if you're afraid of being rejected, then you're going to want to avoid rejection at all costs. And if you avoid rejection at all costs, you're going to have to please the people that are rejecting you somehow, some way. And we call that people-pleasing. And people-pleasing is very, very hard and causes dissatisfaction and no joy or peace in a marriage. Because if you can't be the person that you are God created you to be, you're not going to be satisfied. And your spouse isn't going to be satisfied, and it's not going to work very well. So what we want to do is we want to realize that fear of rejection puts us in a very difficult position for having a great marriage. And we certainly don't want that. So what we also know from when I did codependency is that if I need to please somebody and I need to be accepted, remember part of the definition was that I'm not accepted. Well, if I'm not accepted and I want to be accepted by my spouse or in another relationship, what ends up happening is that I'm going to end up in a place where I need to get my acceptance from somebody outside of me. Well, that's not going to work well, and it's the exact definition of codependency. And codependency means it is one of the major problems in marriage, so that there is no satisfaction and very little joy, and it just doesn't work well to be codependent. We know that for sure. So when you're afraid, you avoid people. You may even get into a place where you not only avoid people, you actually withdraw, and you are even maybe isolated and reclusive. Well, you don't want to do that because why? Because that's going to put you in more pain. That's what the devil wants, more pain for you. You don't want to do that. It's not going to work well, and you don't want to do that. And so you want to definitely realize that that is something that you want to, that's why you want to get healed emotionally enough so that you are not afraid of rejection. And that's very, very important. So you may be, remember I talked about shame and how shame affects because it's a result of pain. Well, guess what? Rejection will cause shame. Enough rejection. If you were rejected over and over again as a child, it will cause you to feel shame. And so you don't want that, and that's not good. I'm going to pull out my glasses here for a minute, and I'm going to read you out of the book. This is a chapter on rejection. What causes fear of rejection? The sources of fear of rejection are as follows. If you have a physical condition which you believe makes yourself unattractive to others, if you were overly rejected as a child, remember I've said that numerous times, when you've been abandoned and unloved. Were you abandoned? Did you feel abandoned? Were you unloved? Well, that's going to cause fear of rejection. If you've had a traumatic experience of being rejected over and over and over again, if you've been exposed, if you've never been exposed to healthy ways of dealing with conflict or disagreement, that happens in a marriage. In a marriage, you're going to have conflict and you're going to have disagreement. That's just part of relationships. You know, we all don't agree on everything. So you've got to learn to how do we deal with conflict and disagreement? How do you deal with conflict and disagreement? Because it's going to be important for you to be able to get healed enough so you don't trigger, because if you trigger, as I said in other prior programs, if you trigger, you're going to be out of control and you're going to lose control, and you're not going to be able to have a good result in your marriage. So you may lack a healthy self-concept. Remember I talked about self-image. Rejection causes a unhealthy self-image, causes you to think that you're not worthy, not valuable, not important, and defective. So it causes that. You don't have a positive self-esteem, and you fear being alone. How many of you listening today fear being alone? Most everybody doesn't want to be alone. They don't like to be alone. So they'll change who they are for not being alone. And so that's really an important thing, because nobody wants to be alone, but you'll people please in order to get people to like you so you're not alone. Now, I want to read to you, this is on page 77 of the book. I want to read to you what results come from fear of rejection, because I can't say it better than the book says it. So regardless of the cause, the fear of rejection can create real problems. Number one, you can become obsessive in many areas of your life, especially in your desperate need for approval. That's the people-pleasing part of this. It can cause you to be clingy. You cling to others. You need others. You need your spouse. You cling too much to your spouse. You people please your spouse. Number three, in your marriage, you can become jealous and exhibit inappropriate, unprovoked anger. Why would you exhibit inappropriate, unprovoked anger? Because you're triggered. Something that's remotely similar happening in your marriage right now is causing something from the past to come forward, as I talked about before, and it's causing unprovoked anger. It can lead you, number four, lead you to drive others away from you. Why? You want to avoid pain of rejection. You often reject others to avoid being rejected yourself. Reject them before they reject you. Problem is, that causes problems in the relationship. Number six, it establishes a damaging pattern of emotional behavior, which can cause real hurt to your relationships and greatly limits your enjoyment of life in general. I told you, you won't have satisfaction, you won't have joy in your marriage. You won't have intimacy for sure. You won't be able to see into each other. You won't be the real people that show up in your marriage, so you can't have a real loving relationship. Seven, when you are rejected repeatedly, it can drive you into depression, anxiety, and self-hatred. That's what it did with me. I was rejected so many times. I hated myself. I was depressed, and it can evoke suicidal thoughts. Now, I want to say something about that just for a minute, because if you're having suicidal thoughts, you need very much to cry out to Jesus. You need very much to cry out to Jesus. You need also, if you're having any kind of suicidal thoughts, you need to get on the phone and talk to somebody. Call a suicide hotline. Do something so that you're not in that position of really doing something that will hurt yourself. Cry out to Jesus. He'll show up for you, and when he shows up for you, he'll change the way you look at yourself, and it'll be a very good thing. So you want to just give Jesus a chance if you have suicidal thoughts. And so you want to definitely realize that suicide is not the right way to go. Even isolation, if you're isolating, you've got to get help. Just get help. That's all it takes, is just get help. So we want to realize that those things that I shared with you are really, they're important enough for you to realize that they will keep you from having not only a great marriage, but a great life. It's just not going to work. And people pleasing isn't going to work in your marriage, and it's just not. You're not going to have the kind of marriage that you want. Remember, I said you could have a marriage made in heaven, on earth, right now, as it is in heaven. But to do that, you've got to have healing. You've got to have a way to be able to get unresolved emotional pain dealt with so you don't trigger. You've got to deal with the rejection that's already happened, the shame, the fear of rejection, and it's very, very important that you end up in a situation where you start, through this process that I'm going to share with you coming up, you start to be able to really love yourself. Now you're going to say, love yourself? How can I love myself? Well, you get pain, unresolved emotional pain dealt with, and you're going to be able to like yourself. Let's just start out with like. Maybe you can't love yourself, but you can like yourself. Remember the great commandment says, love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Well, I look at that and I say, well, if I can't love myself, how am I going to love God, let alone my spouse? How am I going to love my kids? How am I going to love anybody? I can't. That's the truth. If I can't love myself, I can't love anybody else. Well, how do I love myself? I got to have healing. Healing for unresolved emotional pain. Healing for all of the rejection, and you've got to have what we're going to talk about next. You've got to have forgiveness. But one of the things you're going to be excited about is when we talk about the solutions, we're going to talk about how do you become more the person God created you to be. Because see, God loves you so much that He wants you to be who you were created to be, so you can do what you were created to do and have a great marriage, have great family relationships, and have a life of abundance. Jesus said, I came to give you life and give it to you more abundantly. He wants the abundant life for you. I believe you want the abundant life. So we are going to talk next week about forgiveness. It is a critical piece of dealing with rejection in a godly way. Jesus said we must forgive. He forgave on the cross, and we're going to get into that in depth. But I want you to know Jesus is the answer for you that need to reach out, and you need to know God loves you, and God is good, and He's good all the time, and He's for you and for your marriage, and you need to know it.